Nope, not yet.
We are live.
Thank you. Apologize to those viewing for the meeting being delayed a few minutes. Call the meeting to order. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next on the agenda is the approval or revision of the agenda for this evening. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Thank you, Rebecca, and a second from Sherry. Any discussion of the agenda?
Can we just pull 6.03? I just have a quick question on that.
6.03, which is the superintendent's evaluation procedures and timeline. Okay, we will move that to item 7.01. If there are no objections from the board. Any further revisions? Okay, is there a motion to approve the revised agenda? Thank you, Jason. Second from Rebecca. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand and indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Next on the agenda is public comment. Sarah, do we have anyone for public comment this evening?
We do not.
Thank you. We are now at item 2.01, report district action plan. Dr. Tice.
Certainly, at all of your stations should be the annual report for 2019 and 20. I know you've had a chance to see the draft for that. The building principals are with us, as they are every year, to explain the building action plans that derive off the district action plan, the strategic plan that covers 3 years. They will bring you up to date on some of the accomplishments over the past year, as well as the things that they're still working on going forward. So I will turn it over to our building principals.
Sharing my screen with you all. It was interesting as we were all getting ready, and I saw each of you get ready. I noticed that you had Mr. Josh Becker here at your beck and call to help you get ready with technology. I'd just like to point out, you want to get that set up for me? Thanks. Our teachers are doing that every day. They often have maybe 6 to 8 students in front of them, and often many more at home. And they are navigating technology on top of navigating the classroom and the curriculum on a daily basis. And so, as you can imagine, that's quite the heavy lift. And they're doing really an extraordinary job so far. We've asked a great deal, and they have come through. And I'm very proud of the great work of my own building at the high school, teachers, and I know each of my colleagues would say the same about theirs. This has been really an extraordinary time, and our staff has really met that challenge, and we're very proud to call them our colleagues. So we're here to talk to you a little bit about our building goals. You will notice if you compare our goals from 1920 to this year, they're pretty much identical. And that's because in the middle of our work, we were interrupted. Our plans were pretty heavy, focused on collaborative environments, being able to come together to meet and discuss a number of items, to meet and move forward the district goals, focused on the priority areas and of course those specific district goals. And so today we're going to talk to you a little bit more about those. And some of us have some updates, but primarily we're just looking to expand these not only for this year, but also for future years as well. And so at the high school, I'm going to talk about a couple of areas. The first is in the teaching and learning priority area and the district goal, how we're going to expand course offerings, units of study, learning opportunities that promote student engagement and allow for student voice and choice. When our strategic planning committee came together last year, over a year ago, this was an area of focus for us. One thing that we really wanted to do was try to help and promote educational opportunities for students that may be on homebound, not only for maybe a disciplinary issue, but mental health, medical issues. How are we providing education for those students? And originally the goal in 1920 was really focused on trying to create an environment where we could bring students to a campus, whether it be a high school proper or somewhere within the district, to find better ways to provide educational opportunities for students. The more we got into it as a group, the more we realized we don't have the capacity or the number of students that would need that level of support. And so our focus changed in our work to focus on how do we find a better way to communicate amongst all of the cohorts, all of the members, to be able to serve students in a better way. So we had actually, as a group, we actually had a committee focused entirely on homebound. We created a tool to try to help and support student engagement for students that did need homebound. And we were just getting ready to pilot that when we ended up leaving in March. And so our work will continue on that this year and in next, in piloting that and looking for ways to improve communication under those circumstances. Additionally, we had a committee focused on the possibility of only offering the 5 required Regents exams. For those of you that were not on the board, the last time I presented, we talked a great deal about how do we find ways to redefine success for students and families throughout our program. There are a number of schools downstate who do not offer exams outside of those 5. And they made those decisions years and years ago, and they found ways to create a more robust program. And so we were interested in that. And so we decided we would take notice and start research ultimately in that. We contacted schools throughout that region to learn more information and to look within their actual programs, looking at their course catalogs, their course profiles, all in a way to help inform our conversation here as to whether or not that was something that we were interested in. We will continue that conversation moving forward. We're also looking to expand our Link Crew program. Our Link Crew program is a one-day affair, really. It's the introduction of our freshmen to our high school. While we had a very different program this year, we were able to incorporate a number of the components of that. But Link Crew actually has a year-long program that we have never initiated. And so we were looking for ways to bring that full year-long program to help support students throughout their freshman year. And then we're also looking to develop a communication plan to assist 8th graders and specifically their parents to broaden their understanding of what the opportunities were within the high school. The more information they have, the earlier, the better prepared they are to make choices, not only in the selection process. We ask you very early on. The letter goes home in January of 8th grade, actually maybe December of 8th grade, asking you to start thinking about what it is that you want to take in high school. And our thoughts were we could do a better job of finding ways to communicate lots of information to make that process easier, not only for families, but also for students. On school environment, we're looking to identify and evaluate potential changes to the high school schedule to try to support student achievement and their mental health and well-being. We started a committee focused entirely on exploring changes to the high school schedule. We sent out a survey and surveyed all high school faculty, looking for the characteristics that they thought was going to be most beneficial in an academic schedule, but also looking at a schedule that will most benefit students socially and emotionally. What's interesting is we instituted a new wellness break, if you will, within the high school this year because of the state that we're in. It's that type of situation that will broaden our look at how we examine the high school schedule. Big items that have come back when you look at the high school schedule have always been a concern about the fact that we don't mandate lunch. Students are not mandated to take lunch. However, many high schools have 9 or more periods a day where they can operate and be able to take many additional courses. And so we started that conversation. We actually created a survey to go out to students. However, right at that moment when we were going to roll that out, we ended up going out last March. And so we're going to continue that work, looking for more feedback, not only from students, but also from parents, and then pushing that conversation forward with hopefully some new suggestions about how we look at the high school schedule. In addition, this was also in line with the start time study. I think many of you know the high school has a very, very short start to end time. We begin at 7:45, we end at 2:06. That's a very, very, very tight schedule. There's not a lot of room. I don't have additional time ultimately within that. We're kind of at the bare bones minimum. And so in order to make some of these other adjustments, the hope was we might be able to be creative in how we look at transportation and maybe start time, end time, in hopes that it might address some of these pieces. So that's still part of the conversation as well. A big component of our program last year was the introduction of a therapy dog. We gave you a report last year about the therapy dog program, actually provided recommendations to formalize that. We introduced you to Kiki, which was the first. Well, this year we not only have Kiki in the building, but we have 2 additional dogs in the high school. We have Joey and we have Charlie. And so we are very, very happy with the expansion of that program. And we have seen great benefit as a result of that. And so we're going to continue to be doing that. This is very slow. We don't have dogs there 5 days a week. Dogs really can't handle being in the building 5 days a week. Each dog may be there 1 day, maybe twice. But we're really excited about the benefits of a therapy dog, a service dog in the building. Expanding Wellness Day. Wellness has been a big focus of ours for a number of years. As you know, we did the big read last year, and the focus has continued. One of our, actually within our departments, all of our faculty have really been focused on health and wellness throughout the building. But in particular, just this year, our PE department has really been focusing in on this with all of our students. And it's this idea of healthy body, healthy mind. And there is actually a wellness activity every single Wednesday. Every Wednesday, a student has PE. There's a kind of a wellness component to that. So we're constantly looking for additional ways to engage our students in thoughtfulness and wellness. And so we're doing that in some small ways, but we're also looking at larger ways. You saw that last May with a district-wide wellness day, even though we did that virtually. And so we are collaborating across the district and finding ways to put wellness at the forefront. We have expanded some opportunities for mental health first aid for staff in particular. We're looking to expand that beyond just staff, but for students as well. And then we're moving into homework as a big component and been a big focus of ours, and actually focus the connection back to even the schedule. And so we're going to be focusing on looking for ways to collect additional data on homework, both the perception of students, compare that to faculty and staff, and then of course families, with the hope of being able to develop a succinct philosophy statement when it comes to homework, so families truly understand what the focus of and priority is of homework as we move forward. We are also kind of connected to that, and this goes back to scheduling. We're going to institute a time management activity as part of the course selection process. This was something I introduced to you last year as well. Again, it's more information to help students in the course selection process, to help them understand that with every course selection, There's a cost to benefit. When you fill up your schedule with nothing but AP or SUPA classes, and you expect to be able to work or participate in lots of extracurricular, there's all time there, and all of that time will have to be taken from something. So trying to develop a process to help students really see big picture and families to see big picture as they're making decisions for themselves. Connected back to wellness, doing inventories when it comes to stressors and general stress and how students are feeling, general well-being checks have been something that we've really been focusing on for the last couple of years. We saw a lot of that last year while we were out, and we continued that right from the get-go when students started to come back. We are also continuing to review all the mental health and well-being activities offered throughout the building, but also throughout the district. And again, looking to create a new communication kind of pamphlet for parents that highlights what we are doing at the high school to support students' mental health and wellness. Again, trying to communicate all the different items that are available to students and to families. Again, trying to be an open book, open communication to help. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our middle school colleagues.
Good evening, everyone. Mrs. Melissa Corbett and I are thrilled to join you this evening to provide an overview of both the Eagle Hill and Wellwood Middle School building plans, including goals and strategies. As reflected in our plans, both our goals and strategies encompass multiple years. Similar to the high school and the elementary schools, the building closure in March of 2020 and the focus of reopening schools during an international pandemic has shifted the pace and timeline of the middle school building plans. At both middle schools, our expert teachers have designed and implemented incredible learning opportunities for our students in a challenging context for public education. Our staff members continue to inspire students, support academic, emotional, and social growth, both in our classrooms and in a virtual environment, and model educational excellence and progressivism looking towards the future. Teaching and learning at Eagle Hill and Wellwood Middle Schools continue to evolve in our design of learning that supports students' inquiry and collaboration. Through interdisciplinary projects, including our PAC projects in grade 8 English Language Arts and Social Studies, and our roller coaster builds with detailed physics and engineering descriptions in grade 6 English Language Arts, Mathematics, and Science, our students demonstrate leadership and choice in their learning, along with unwavering engagement, individual talent, and voice. As colleagues, we continue to examine flexibility in our master schedule, and now our physical space within CDC and New York State Department of Health guidelines to create both time and space to continue to promote projects across multiple content areas. Exploring and expanding opportunities for our students to practice and refine real-world problem solving with an authentic audience engages our entire community. Collegial collaboration to design learning opportunities has shaped flexibility in the way that we group students. Further, our units of study and course offerings, such as our 8th grade elective, Agents of Change, continue to grow. These opportunities have opened our curriculum, instruction, and assessments to reflect students' choice and voice of topics, problem identification, solution design, and assessment of achievement. Specific to Eagle Hill Middle School, we will continue to explore specific models of academic intervention services, enrichment, and technology instruction. Planned visits to other middle schools in New York State were canceled last spring. The demand to change our delivery of instruction that began with the building closures in March necessitated our rapid further engagement in our online learning management system. Beyond that necessity, teachers at Eagle Hill continue to model collaboration and excel in fostering incredibly strong learning communities within teams across grade levels. Projects in the humanities focus on civic engagement and community advocacy, sharing themes of real-world application, while designs in mathematics, science, and technology, shared with grade level peers who visit our showcases, exemplify all of our students' achievement. Now, considerations from room occupancy limits to the hybrid or completely online structure of students' attendance in school will further guide our investigation of models that most effectively provide academic intervention services and enrichment in whole group and small group designs. This year, our academic intervention models continue to include both integrated support during English language arts and mathematics classes and small group support in English language arts, literacy, and mathematics labs. Lastly, we will continue to focus on the character strengths of the Positivity Project, health and wellness. The current context of educating in a global pandemic has demanded that we gather strength, including kindness, perseverance, perspective, resiliency, and teamwork. The impact of multiple recent events during this moment in time leads us to examine our health and wellness as individuals and as a community. Beginning with a tool for students to create on Thursday, September 10th, our first day of school this year, to foster awareness and choice for academic, emotional, and social support when faced with a challenge, to students sharing their character trait for a year-long display of our collective strengths here at Eagle Hill, now may be the best and most imperative time to support the development of ourselves, support one another with great flexibility, and genuinely promote character education and positivity in our community. We have been and will continue to be our greatest resource for one another, and will continue to intentionally share our successes and our strategies throughout this school year. Mrs. Melissa Corbin will now provide an overview of Wellwood Middle School.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us. Similar to the other buildings, Wellwood's work will continue with the goals we established last year. Under the priority area of school environment, Wellwood continues our work with expanding social emotional learning and support for students. We will continue to build on the work that our elementary schools began with the Second Step program. Last year, our school psychologist and counselor began utilizing the Second Step program with students who they see for counseling groups and will continue to do so this year. Over the last few years, we have brought in at least one outside speaker per year, as our staff shared that these assemblies have helped to shape very positive conversations inside and outside of classrooms. Unfortunately, this goal will have to be put on hold this year until we are able to bring in outside speakers again. But we are trying to think creatively about how to connect students virtually with others. Again, this year, we began the year with John Tamino, who is the founder of In My Father's Kitchen. He shared his story to inspire our own students to help others. Our virtual assembly served to lay the foundation for the work we will do this year to support others in the Central New York community. Last year, our counselors explored mentoring programs in surrounding middle schools. This year, they will move forward with plans to formalize a mentoring program for our students. And as you're very familiar, Wellwood will continue its work with the Positivity Project. Our Character Education Committee's goal this year is to increase student recognition for those exhibiting the other people matter and positivity in action mindsets. This work will be very important as we all lean on our strengths and on one another to successfully meet the challenges we must face this year. As you are all well aware, this will be a big year for Wellwood with the continued construction. The planning and communication associated with a project of this size will continue to be at the forefront of our work this year. As several of you have seen firsthand, our modular classrooms are in full use. They are beautiful and truly are an exceptional temporary addition to our learning environment. As I hope you have heard, the feedback from both our students and staff has been very positive. As with any project, the transition plan of spaces will continue to be reviewed and evaluated based upon the changing plans with construction. As we review each phase of the project, we will continue to make decisions that are in the best interest of our students. Communication will continue to be a focus as well, so that we can make sure that all constituents are well informed. We are excited about the instructional options that the project rooms will provide at the completion of the project. Our teacher leaders will continue to lead conversations within department meetings to brainstorm how these new project rooms will be utilized and how instructional staff can consider making adjustments instructionally to take advantage of these anticipated locations down the road. Thank you for your time. Now I'll turn it over to the elementary. Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to review and share our strategic planning and building goals. As my high school and middle school colleagues described, we too decided that we would continue with our important goals this year and extend the timelines. We met virtually with our building planning teams and we were able to report our successes. These goals were developed with the idea of returning to school in a typical pre-COVID setting. As spring progressed, we needed to shift our priorities, and many of these important goals have been placed on pause or have simply been reframed to refocus on reopening in a hybrid model. The first priority area of teaching and learning, we developed a goal to study the benefits and challenges of alternative scheduling options that support differentiated academic growth and inquiry-based instruction. Given our COVID setting, we did need to develop alternative schedules for our hybrid and remote learning this summer. We were able to develop a 3-week special rotations, which allows students to have an in-person experience while at school and a Wednesday plan for fully remote learners. Our hybrid plan was developed to allow for synchronous and asynchronous opportunities for all learners. This plan has allowed us to think more flexibly and creatively regarding student engagement and completion of learning activities. We have extended the timeline of this goal and still hope to learn and adopt new ideas for schedules throughout the year. The 3 elementary buildings will continue to collaborate and develop a matrix of challenges and benefits to new schedules. In addition, we will work on short-term and a long-term proposal. We will collect feedback from stakeholders based on adjustments that we made due to our hybrid model. And next, I'll turn it over to Debbie to go into specifics.
Good evening. In our next goal area, we continue our work to develop opportunities and spaces that support student inquiry and innovation. Each elementary building had different strategies in place for achieving this goal, such as makerspace facilities, and/or activities, Wonder Wednesdays, Genius Hour, and morning clinics of professional development focused on inquiry. This year, some of these strategies are on pause due to the new hybrid model and adjustments to schedules, facilities, and instruction. For example, professional development this year is currently organized to focus on supporting teachers with the implementation of the hybrid model, including technology and instructional skills and strategies necessary to implement synchronous and asynchronous learning. Additionally, makerspace lessons are on hold as we cannot use shared supplies for project-based learning, and makerspace facilities are being used for alternate purposes. But even though some of these initiatives are temporarily paused, ensuring students have opportunities to think creatively and inquisitively are certainly still an ongoing priority at the elementary level. In addition to the excellent instruction provided by our teachers, at each of the elementary schools, we are continuing to implement this year our Wonder Wednesday program, in which students in all cohorts, whether learning in school or remotely, will have the opportunity to stretch and challenge their thinking. Social emotional learning and supporting our students' mental health are even more important this school year than ever before due to the quarantining in the spring and the current pandemic. Due to the pandemic, our supports may look different, but are just as intentional, meaningful, and necessary. At the beginning of the year, school counselors, school psychologists, and our homeschool liaison are ensuring that all students, whether in cohorts A, B, or C, feel connected to their school community and classroom and feel safe and comfortable learning in this new setting. We will continue to make data-based decisions on how best to support students with their own unique personal, social, and emotional needs. We will also continue to utilize our Second Step program, particularly in the primary grades of kindergarten and first, as we highlight building a foundation of skills such as learning readiness, problem solving, emotion management, and empathy. At Enders, we had hoped to implement the therapy dog program similar to the high school with BOE, who was in training prior to the pandemic. However, when our human schools closed, so did puppy school. Thus, at this time, we are pushing back the start of the program till either the spring or fall of 2021 until BOE's school reopens. We look forward to implementing this important program as soon as possible, because certainly more of social emotional support for our students and staff is a top priority, and having BOE there to support us would be wonderful. I'll now turn the presentation over to Jonna Johnson from Mott Road Elementary, who will speak to you regarding our last goal. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for having us here tonight. Our final goal relates to establishing community partnerships that support personal, social growth and development. This goal too requires some bringing together of students in different buildings. So we had established a connection with the high school. We established a big SIBS program last year, trying to establish that partnership between the older students and the younger students for both academics and for the social support. In addition, we had looked at having some different strategies that included career exploration through Genius Hour, through a career fair, and unfortunately that is also placed on hold temporarily. We will continue to explore ways to generate ideas for students in terms of career exploration throughout the year. We do plan on continuing with Genius Hour projects and inquiry-based projects as well, and maintaining those partnerships to further develop those experiences for the students in our buildings. So while there are some limited opportunities to bring in those partnerships, we are looking to explore those partnerships in new and different ways. So again, this is a goal that will continue on. We're in the midst of expanding these goals. In March, we had developed a really good relationship and a good start with the high school. And we were just in the beginning stages of doing those interest inventories and establishing the partnerships within the community that would relate back to those projects in class. So again, that wraps up our elementary building goals for this year. We really appreciate your support. We appreciate all that our teachers and staff are doing to keep our students' academic and social emotional growth a top priority. And we are very, very fortunate to work here with our colleagues this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all of our principals for sharing this information with us. Are there any questions or comments from the board at this time? It's a tremendous amount of work that you're doing, especially managing online and in-person learning.
I would certainly like to thank the administrators for being here tonight and all the work that they've put in. Much of what you see in the annual report through their guidance and leadership, as well as the hard work of the faculty and staff, I think gives us reason to be proud in terms of that first annual report, which I think showcases a lot that was done prior to the pandemic. As you heard tonight, as we delve into our own district and board goals, this was a great status report. Some things are on pause right now, but the whole purpose of a multi-year strategic plan was to be able to go after some very important goals that would extend over a single year. So again, I'm very proud of the inroads we've made so far. I thank the building administrators and the district office administrators in the back for their leadership through this, and looking forward to what the future has to hold.
Rebecca, go ahead.
Yeah, just having the chance to see all of you in person. I just want to thank you so much for all of your incredibly hard work over the summer through the fall to get us started in this hybrid model. And the feedback that I've heard in the community has been overwhelmingly positive. We know, just want to thank you, all of your teachers, all of the support staff for everything you're doing. Just really, really grateful.
Other comments or questions from the board?
I think we probably would all echo our gratitude and encouragement because it's not over, right? I unmuted. Am I not being heard?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Thank you all so much. We know the game has just begun, really, right? And it's a lot ahead of you. So best of luck, and let us know if we can support you in any way.
Elena?
I also greatly appreciate the longevity that you all bring to the district. And with that, I feel as if you can all work better together. And you've remained true and loyal to FM through this entire pandemic prior to, and I'm sure that you will post. So I greatly appreciate the fact that we have that experience between all of you, and it makes all our buildings that much stronger and our district that much stronger. So thank you.
Next on the agenda is the president's report. Just have a couple items. We will be discussing the agenda for the retreat at our October board meeting, the second October board meeting, to see what the board would like to have on the agenda for that first retreat of the school year. Student board member, that is in progress. Student elections are being planned at the high school, so we should have more information about a student board member shortly. And then lastly, just my thanks to, as we have just given to the principals, to our staff and teachers and parents and students for making this a very good start to the school year. Thank you. Next on the agenda, Dr. Tice, Superintendent's report.
Thank you, President Mims. Included in your board packet is the superintendent's report. Under internal operations, our policy committee will meet tomorrow to begin our transition to the New York State School Board's policy services from the Erie One BOCES policy service. So we will be revisiting how we are going through the policies to ensure a regular review cycle, which was already underway with the Erie One policies. Under community relations, our known COVID medical director, Dr. Diane Montgomery, has been working to update our reopening plan language and frequently asked questions document to reflect our current practice. You will have the opportunity to meet her later this evening virtually, but I wanted to let you know that her perspective and input has been invaluable for our entire school district. Under administration, there were some technological glitches early in the school year, so I would reach out to those families who were experiencing difficulty and encourage them to call our own help desk at 315-692-1111 for assistance during the school day. We're also training the help desk workers because some of it is involving software. They've usually provided hardware support. And software is something typically the computer resource teachers have provided over time. So the whole pandemic and the hybrid approach has shifted in our needs in terms of trying to get people cross-trained for both hardware and software support. And this would include teaching assistants as well, helping the students. Under non-instructional business operations, you may be aware that the school district must now provide food service to families through the end of the calendar year. I'm sure this will be revisited in the future, but in lieu of delivering our meals by the transportation department, we are using 3 pickup points where families can gather their meals after ordering them ahead of time. You may have noticed that we've pushed this information out to the community via the website and social media. Under the area of personnel, our new Special Patrol Officer, Brian Damon, started today. Peace Officer Damon is a former CIRO at East Syracuse Manoa, and he will fill in at Wellwood and Fayetteville Elementary campus until the return of the CIRO from a leave in early October. So I ask you to please join me in welcoming Officer Brian Damon to the FM Central School District community. Some members of the community are organizing a rally to support our police, including the CIROs, which is scheduled for 11 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, this Saturday, September 26th at Lewis Park in Manoa. And they have asked the district to be represented there as well for the work that the CIROs have done, both there and at ESM. Under students, unfortunately, we will be canceling our participation in the Spelling Bee and Geography Bee, as many other districts have done because of the pandemic. Nevertheless, we're still in the process of examining all of our extracurricular activities to see what, if any, we are able to offer in the year ahead. Under the area of instruction, and given the move of the Professional Development Day from the General Election Day on November 3rd to earlier in the year, I would like to announce formally that Tuesday, November 3rd will be a remote-only day for all 3 cohorts. This is because some of our schools are used as polling places for the general election and was one of the reasons that we scheduled the Staff Development Day for that time. Since it's already an instructional day, I will not ask you to take action on this, but we will push that information out to the community through the school messenger alert as well as the website. Under strategic planning construction, the Wellwood Capital Project is progressing smoothly. In fact, members of our own facilities committee participated in a sneak preview on Thursday, September 10th, which included a visit to the new temporary classroom suite at the rear of the building. Structural steels being erected in the cafeteria, kitchen, main office, moving to the lobby areas. The masons are installing the brick facade over the vapor barriers, and the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing contractors are working to ensure that the new addition is tied into the existing building utilities. And then last but not least, under reopening, our reopening went very smoothly. A big shout out to the administrators, faculty, and staff for all of their work. Aside from the vehicular traffic flow issues that have always existed prior to the pandemic, the staggered arrival and dismissal times for the students appear to be working well. While it was quite a bit of work on everyone's part, the students and teachers are finally settling into their routines. I received a lot of feedback, positive feedback, as I'm sure you have on the new school year, including our welcoming videos that were crafted by the building administrators and the orientation activities for the grade levels that were new to each building. And speaking of the positive feedback, I think I shared with you over a month ago about the nearly 600 Let's Talk inquiries that we had. I finally was able to complete all of those responses. We are also, speaking of communication, completing daily the required information for the COVID-19 dashboard at the New York State Department of Health. As I said, this has to be submitted daily to the New York State Department of Health portal so that they can track even students that are being sent out from our isolation rooms. That ends my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tice. Are there any questions from the board for Dr. Tice? Next on the agenda, item 2.04, committee report. Audit is scheduled to meet on the 24th. Community relations, we currently do not have a meeting scheduled. Facilities, I believe we got a report at our last meeting about your tour. Your meeting on the 1st. Is there anything new to add from facilities, since that's sort of a hotbed right now? No? Okay.
I would just echo what Dr. Tice said, you know, there was obviously a lot of talk about the modulars leading into the whole construction process. And I will readily admit, I was one of the ones on that original fence of how on earth do we do trailer classrooms in central New York. And I would venture to guess by now that all of the students in that building are jealous of whichever students are assigned to that part of that building, because they really came out as just a pure extension of the existing building, and you have no sense in there whatsoever of their temporary nature. So kudos to how those turned out.
That is very good to hear. Thank you very much to Bill Furlong and his team. Any other questions for Dr. Tice? Okay. Policy committee. They are meeting tomorrow, as Dr. Tice just mentioned. FM Education Foundation, Sherry? Okay, no meetings yet. And legislative liaisons. Rebecca, I think you have some information for us. No? I see the proposed resolutions PDF is here.
You want me to go ahead?
Oh.
All right. We attached the proposed resolutions to this meeting's agenda. At the next meeting's agenda, we will allot some time so that we can go over them. There were around 20 of them this year. And I really just skimmed through, but just to highlight a few that we have discussed that NISBA will be discussing and voting on. Number 4 dealt with pilot agreements. Number 14 dealt with election arrangements, and which I thought initially would have something to do with what we've been interested in, but it actually is evidently one district had a situation where there was a tremendous windstorm that knocked down electricity and everything, disaster the day of their election. So they're looking to allow local decisions to be made about how to reschedule because of events like that. Number 15 had to do with parent advocates for a committee on special education meetings. Technology related to COVID funding and equity were number 6 and number 17. And then proposed resolution 18 was to oppose mid-year state aid cuts. So those are some that we have discussed and that would be relevant, but take a look and we can discuss on October 3rd, at our October 3rd meeting, what our positions will be when actually Rebecca will be voting this year.
So Marissa, do we want to hear about finance?
Oh, 1 second, let me go back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one question on the legislative while we're on that piece? And I know there was, Dr. Tice, I think maybe it was last Thursday you made comment on this in your Thursday letter, but there was some information I had forwarded before that on the CARES Act funding that's being held at the state level that was intended for all of the PPE expenses, et cetera, that we've incurred and will continue to incur. Do you have any more update on that? And is there anything more that we should be doing legislatively or lobbying wise to work toward the freeing of that funding to reimburse what we've already spent and to help with what we still need to spend?
As I believe I said, or I can clarify now, the deadline was extended, I think, from August 15th to the 31st. So we do have our proverbial foot in the door for that. We are gathering because some of the buildings did their own PPE purchases in addition to what district office was doing. So we are pooling those totals together. And then last but not least, we did a group of superintendents meet with Congressman John Katko, trying to encourage both Republicans and Democrats to be bipartisan, work together to release not only that funding, which was stopgapped, you're right, in Albany, but a second CARES Act funding that would go directly to the local municipalities, regardless of size of the county, which is what our problem was in the first CARES Act. We were under $500,000. We're counties like Monroe County were over the $500,000 cutoff, so the money ended up directly there. Ours ended up being stopgapped in Albany to be parceled out later. So our foot's in the door. We're putting together everything we need to do to submit for that. We're keeping our fingers crossed that it wasn't spent already on something else. And we're trying to encourage that second CARES Act bill if they can muster the support for that to be passed.
Thank you. And for the second time, I forgot about finance. Mark?
That's quite all right. Can everybody hear me? Okay, perfect. I'd like to especially thank Bill Furlong and his staff for all the hard work they've been doing. And to Dan's question, Bill did review at the finance meeting that he does have special account codes where he's tracking all of our PPE expenses, everything that we buy, so that we'll be able to convey to legislators how much has been spent so far to date. We reviewed the 1920 financial results, which came in pretty much in line with Bill had indicated this summer. And then along with the audit, he'll be able to finalize those numbers, but it's pretty much on track with the what he had reported previously. We discussed the 2021 financial forecast. It's looking like by mid-October, when we meet next, he'll have a better indication of where we are in the current year with some of our expenses, some of our savings, and perhaps some of the challenges we're going to look at it by the end of the year. And then we did take a look at the 21-22 financial outlook. And quite frankly, everything is going to hinge upon the 20% aid reduction. In discussions with Bill, in discussions with some of my old colleagues, there's not 100% clarification on what that aid means, because as you may be aware, building aid is a huge component of the credit and the debt that schools pay to investors. So typically in the past, that has never been touched because that has huge implications in the credit market. So we're trying to get some clarification on that. But that, unfortunately, is an ongoing discussion. Bill did review the district borrowings, which have come in at tremendously low rates over the last year, obviously because of the economy. And that pretty much wraps it up.
Thank you very much, Mark. Okay, so that should do it for committee reports. Next on the agenda, item 3.01 is approval of the.
May I?
Oops, sorry, did I?
I'm sorry, just to go back, text message from Mr. Furlong.
Oh.
The CARES Act application was submitted. We have not yet received approval. This was the 170,000 K that was reduced from our state aid originally, if you remember, in the figures that he had shared. So, sorry, thank you.
That's okay. I thought I missed something on the agenda. That's good news. I'm glad that Bill's on top of it. Okay. All right, item 3.01, approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting held on Monday, August 10th, 2020 as presented? Thank you, Sherry. Second, excuse me, from Kelly. Any discussion of those minutes? All those in favor, please raise your hand and indicate aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? And 3.02, approval of the minutes of August 24th, special meeting. Is there a motion of the Board of Education to approve the minutes of the special meeting held on Monday, August 24th, 2020 as presented? Mark, second from Beryl. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Next, item 3.03. Is there a motion of the Board of Education to approve the minutes of a special meeting held on Tuesday, September 8th, 2020 as presented? Thank you, Jason. Second from Kelly. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Item 3.04. Is there a motion? The board approved the minutes of the special meeting held on Monday, September 14th, 2020 as presented. Thank you, Sherry. Second from Dan. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Thank you. Item 3.05. Is there a motion that the Board of Education approve the personal actions as recommended by the superintendent?
So,
And a second from Daryl. All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Next, we have a resolution in regards to face coverings. So I'll read the resolution, and then of course we'll have some discussion, and Dr. Montgomery is joining us, will be joining us. Oh, there she is. She's
I
already
think
here.
she's there.
Okay, perfect. All right, so is there a motion as recommended by the COVID-19 medical director and in accordance with the Centers for Disease Control and Onondaga County Department of Health guidelines, the Board of Education, the Fayetteville-Manlius School District requires the use of masks by all staff and students while at school unless A, medically contraindicated. Thank you, contraindicated. B, during a designated mask break. C, during a designated lunch period when eating. Or D, when participating in a sport, in which case mask usage shall be in compliance with the regulations for that sport as set forth by the New York State Sports Association. I know I left out some letters.
Public High School Athletic Association.
Thank you, Dan. Further, masks must have 2 or more layers and be worn over the nose and mouth. Gaiters, bandanas, buffs, and masks with vents are prohibited. This resolution is effective immediately with a grace period until October 5th, 2020. Your motion. Thank you, Rebecca. Second from Daryl. Discussion. I'll start with Dr. Montgomery.
Or Dr. Tice, I know.
Or Dr. Tice.
Echo.
There we go.
Is the new language in there, Sarah, about under the chin? I know.
It is not. We had a late revision by Dr. Montgomery this afternoon. Dr. Montgomery, if you'd like to unmute and review that content.
Go ahead.
Could you please review the content you requested me add for nose, mouth, and chin?
I'm sorry, say that again. You were breaking up, please.
I apologize in the sheet. Could you please repeat the addition to the resolution regarding masks covering nose, mouth, and chin?
And secured under the chin. Did everyone hear that?
Yes.
So that would be
Correct.
So that would be the second line from the bottom where we would add to be worn over the nose and mouth to be secured under the chin or unsecured under the chin.
Yes.
And that is from the CDC guidance, right? It was just, we caught that today. Thank you.
So the draft resolution that the board received on Wednesday or Thursday, it went to council and then it went also to Dr. Montgomery for review before coming to the board. So that's why you notice some changes that were made to the draft resolution that you received previously. Dr. Montgomery, was there anything you wanted to add in regards to the resolution? Or, I mean, first off, I want to thank you so much for taking on this challenge to be our COVID director, because that is a huge position that we really needed someone. And it's fortunate that we found someone in our community who has had students who attended our school. So we very much appreciate you coming aboard the FM family in that capacity.
You're welcome.
Was there anything that you wanted to speak to in regards to the resolution?
I think we needed to add more detail, especially because the CDC is constantly updating their websites and their recommendations as we learn more and more about how to prevent transmission of the coronavirus. And also certainly, you know, a lot of the parents have also, you know, as we know, they always bring up issues and bring certain things to our attention also. So a combination of all that really has prompted us to do that. And I think that now that they are prohibiting things like gators, we really do need to go ahead and put that in writing so that we are able to enforce that at school appropriately. Any questions?
I see Kelly and then Dan.
First of all, welcome aboard, Dr. Montgomery, and thank you so much. So I guess my question is, you know, because things are changing so much and, you know, we put forth this resolution now, what happens, what's the plan in the future, you know, for keeping, and maybe this is, you know, for both of you, Dr. Montgomery and for Dr. Tice, you know, how are we going to continue to keep the parents aware of new developments that might be things we might have to add to this, or something that might no longer, you know, maybe is not relevant anymore. I just want to make sure that this resolution is not seen as like the end all be all final say on this necessarily.
That's an excellent question. And I actually sent in several updates to several areas with Dr. Tice's approval, of course, to be updated on the website regarding a lot of these issues. So, and I do know that people are checking the website, and there was a case where, you know, 1 or 2 areas we didn't get a chance to update yet, and that was brought up. So we have done it today. This issue with the mask will be done once it's approved. It's already been sent kind of on the drawing board, so to speak. So it's ready to be put up once it's been, if, you know, obviously, of course, with approval. And so we are trying our best to do that now. And I'm very involved with that so that I can quickly, you know, I can translate all that medical issue quickly into how can we present it on the website so that it's easy to communicate with the parents.
So do we think that would be not like just an update on something, you know, the FAQs, or like an alert that might go out and say, you know, hey, we kind of made a change to this, so make sure you go back and check out the FAQs. I just want to make sure that, you know, something like this is clearly important for making sure that everyone's safe. And I just want to make sure that people, you know, this might, I don't know, to me, it might rise to the level of some sort of alert beyond just changing something on the website. So I don't know if, you know, Dr. Tice, if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, we're more than happy to do that, and we wanted to kind of memorialize it by bringing it to the board this evening. Dr. Montgomery's referred to some other minor changes we've made, because if you remember, the plan was a draft anyhow, so now the language is actually matching what we're doing. If you may recall, we were going to use an app originally back before July 31st, that families were going to fill out. We had our medical advisory board indicate that, no, take the temperatures here. That's what we're doing now. That's what we've pushed out. But if you go back to the frequently asked questions, Dr. Montgomery's been kind enough to go through to match our current practice to what it should say. So that I'm not worried about pushing out, because we've advertised that we're taking the temperature screening here. It's just a matter of correcting the old language you know, this sounds like the dinosaurs, but pre-July 31st, you know, we're correcting language. And again, it's changing so frequently. This here is pretty major, plus the fact, even though the CDC, and I think Mr. Seidberg had mentioned the research that came out from the Duke study, the CDC just recently changed the guidance on that. Didn't mention bandanas in there either, which the Duke study did. And so we're really, in Dr. Montgomery, focusing on the multi-ply cotton masks that secure under the chin, so in accordance with the CDC guidance. And that's something we wrestle with. Dr. Montgomery and I talk quite frequently, because sometimes it's New York State DOH, is it CDC, what's the guidance we're following? I mean, we just want the most up-to-date and current that's going to protect the children, the faculty, the staff, which I know the board does as well. So I think the major ones, you're right, we'll bring here to memorialize. We'll push out, whether it's with our school alert system, school messenger, but some of the minor ones, I do not want to trouble our medical review board or trouble you. Some of the minor things we can just clean up, but anything major, especially where they've changed the guidance on gaiters, and the question is, bandanas were silent on, we just want to make sure we memorialize it for everywhere.
Yeah, so I just want to build on that a little bit. I'll come back to the grace period question. I don't want to leave that one. We'll come back to that. But I appreciate the changes to the language, and I think as a policy to be in place in the district, it's obviously a necessary policy, and it's a good policy, and it's not comprehensive. I'm just a little bit confused and concerned about why is it coming to us in the form of a resolution? Because to this point, we haven't been asked to actually formally approve any of the rules, processes, or guidelines that we're following. And so this is the first of just any piece that's come to us. And it's the reason I'm concerned about it coming to us in this form is, as you just mentioned, as Dr. Montgomery mentioned, this changes sometimes multiple times in a day. I mean, CDC released guidance today, they pulled it back. And if we have something that's adopted as a formal board resolution, then for that to be changed, we need to meet again. Or if it went into policy, we obviously have a long stretch of things we'd have to follow there. So to me, this belongs much more appropriately as just an administrative regulation. Put it in, have it effective, announce it, but let's not lock it in as a board resolution that ties the district's hands to have to spend time to change something that may need to be changed much faster than that. So I'm definitely concerned about that tying our hands going forward. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that before we talk about the grace period piece of it.
And I'm comfortable with that. I think that's one of the reasons I pushed it here for that discussion. So you're coming across loud and clear. I don't know what the feeling is the rest of the board. I mean, I am fine and very comfortable. Making decisions isn't a problem for me. So I'm happy to work with Dr. Montgomery. We talk with regularity. It's how much the board wants to be involved with that. So I concur. I'm comfortable with that.
I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, for consistency's sake, I think that Dan's suggestion does make sense. And I think you and Dr. Montgomery and the administrative team are really in the thick of these decisions. So I think that does make sense. And then in terms of wearing my community relations hat, I agree that either a push out from the building level or maybe just a simple district-wide shows that we're very proactive making these changes as they make sense to us, and will assuage a lot of concerns that parents have that are really following the changes. So sounds like that's all happening. So thank you.
So I would support Dr. Tice and Dr. Montgomery, making the decisions rather than, as Dan suggested, having a resolution that might constantly have to be updated.
Can I just ask one thing quickly? What
So the only
about,
piece I would add to that is I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. I took my ear thing out. I'm sorry. Sorry, doctor.
oh, don't worry. I just had a question about if we are going to put this forward and in a different way, it is quite important for, pretty much everything we're doing here. So how, how do you bring up the enforcement issue? Or, I don't want to make it sound that harsh, but we obviously have masks to offer students, so that's not an issue there. But, or maybe this is kind of a routine thing that it can be easily enforced. Otherwise, it doesn't have to be a resolution. I guess that's my question.
I am comfortable, like I said, making it administrative regulation. I was trying to get the appetite of the board, how much you wanted to be involved. I've talked with other faculty and staff members who said, well, why isn't the board involved? Why isn't the medical review board, the advisory committee called back to make these? I think it stays at the administrative level just for the nimbleness of that. So there's no argument here. I totally agree with that. But part of my method to the madness and having it discussed tonight was to decide how involved you all wanted to be. If you're comfortable giving that authority to the superintendent and Dr. Montgomery, we're happy. I mean, we talk quite frequently, like I said, so that should not be an issue. The grace period, I still want to go back to as well, because if you had a chance to read my email today, that suggestion came from the administrative cabinet as a whole, feeling that the children needed and the families needed that time to transition.
Rebecca.
Carol might actually have had her hand up
Oh,
first. So
sorry.
go ahead, Daryl.
Oh, no, I just wanted, I wanted to agree with all of you. I'm comfortable with it staying with Dr. Montgomery and Dr. Tice. I think Dr. Montgomery might be wondering, how do we enforce it? I think we go back to our code of conduct, correct?
Correct.
Which Dr. Montgomery might not be aware of, so.
Thank you.
And that was something, Dr. Montgomery, just so you know, we talked with legal counsel about, so it would fall under insubordination in terms of our progressive discipline policy within the district code of conduct.
Thank you.
I really had nothing further to add than that. So.
Okay. Dan, is that your hand up?
So, yeah, so just to close the loop on that, we've talked about this, you've talked about this a lot, Dr. Tice, before that. I think that's the right approach to handling it administratively. On the components that are substantive and significant, more eyes are always better than fewer. So if there is a revision to be made to it, I would just ask if you are able to float that out to us, we can put more eyes to that. That's part of what led to this one being revised. So it can't hurt to always put more eyes and perspectives onto it. Mm-hmm. The second part is this grace period. So this current iteration of the CDC mask guidance regarding gaiters and 2 layers actually came out on August 28th. So we're already 3 weeks into that. It shouldn't be new to anybody. We have an in-school day tomorrow, and we have a Wednesday. I since this is not a today's guidance, it's a guidance that's been out. I would advocate, especially since we have masks on hand, if people don't have appropriate ones, that if we could push this out as an announcement tomorrow, effective as early as Thursday's in-person day. I don't see a reason personally to push it out longer or further past that. It's, it's concerning if we actually have students or staff or faculty, whatever the case may be, coming to school with masks with exhalation vents on them. If we have students coming in wearing things that are not at all effective or that could perhaps, according to the studies, worsen the situation, I don't think we should be waiting. If we have this clear guidance from the CDC and we have it and have had it, then I'd like to, that's the flexibility that in administrative regulation allows. I think we should be staying as current as possible, and I don't see a need to leave that amount of time.
I think then in that case, just make sure that you stress that there, as we know, but everyone may not know, that there are masks available for anyone who cannot meet this guidance right away, or however you want to word it. But I would really stress that, because I think, making sure your child has a mask, where do you put it, where is it, leaving the home in the morning for a lot of families, is a lot to do. And so this change, although very, important and critical, we want to reassure the families that, it's okay if it takes a little time for them to get another one that they may want from home. We have availability to give that reassurance, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think my concern, and not that I would ever accuse any faculty or staff not being sensitive, but, there's always the case of, how do you mention that to a kid who walks in with an inappropriate mask, who maybe didn't know, or the family didn't have a chance. So, you know, I just want everyone to be really sensitive to that and how they might handle it with that child to make sure that they did have a mask that was appropriate. Because I think, there would probably be kids who would be really embarrassed by that kind of thing and maybe feel like, even though they weren't purposefully trying not to follow the rules, it's, to your point, getting out of school in the house in the morning and having to remember things like masks, even though it's 6 months in, is sometimes that happens. So, but we do have masks as a district, and parents should definitely know that, while obviously this is important and we should be following the guidelines, the second we know about them, that we are there to support them as they try to transition.
Large contingency or percentage of our children?
Our understanding is it's pretty limited in terms of, it may even be more employees that are using the gators. Yeah. And I don't think it was a lack of urgency in the decision. It was just being able, just for what Ms. Fumarola said, not to make any student feel embarrassed or inadequate, or, I mean, it was just a matter of giving enough foreshadowing. So I don't think it was because of a lack of urgency for making the change.
I'm not suggesting that it is, but I think in some instances, we're here now. So we are where we are. The guidance is what it is. I think we should roll it out and have it be what's going to be enforced.
And for bandanas as well, even though the CDC didn't, for whatever reason, change it. And I know we say August 28th or July 31st, like it's ancient history, but that you're right, it's changing very frequently. And CDC may say one thing and DOH says something totally different.
Okay, any additional questions about what is now a administrative rec regarding face coverings, or any questions for Dr. Montgomery while she's here? Okay, well, thank you very much. Oops. Ellen? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the screen. I didn't see your hand up. Go ahead.
So will the language now be changing on the regulation? I'm not going to call it a resolution since it really does not belong as a board resolution, but in terms of when it becomes effective. I mean, I know we've had the conversation, we've gone back and forth, but I just want to make sure we come back around, when it is that we are going to try to enforce the regulations on face coverings.
I will talk to Dr. Montgomery and talk to the administrative team. I want to give an opportunity to push this out tomorrow so that families can adjust. We have the authority because we have to provide the masks. We can ask students to change over, even if it's a matter of, as Mr. Seidberg said, cohort B using our provided masks for the last 2 days of this week. But I also think of the plastic bags, which have been in place with, not enforcing for 2 months. I mean, I just want to make sure families have time that we get this announcement out, because I do not want to embarrass anybody, as Ms. Fumarola said.
Okay.
Dr. Tice, can you just update the board in your Thursday letter this week as far as the updated plan after you have a chance to talk to your cabinet?
I will.
And Dr. Montgomery? Okay, great, thank you.
So just the last thing, just to close on some things that you mentioned and Dr. Montgomery mentioned, was tweaks and updates into the frequently asked questions. As a parent, I read the frequently asked questions when they got added. I haven't gone back to them because I haven't known that there's a reason to go back to them. So I would really advocate, no matter how small, if a change is being made, then in some form or format, it should get pushed out. And there's also the reality that not everybody visits that website. and certainly not every day. But I know we've talked about this before, Dr. Tice. We know we're pushing every family to go to Schoology and to live off of Schoology for everything. So if this type of information is going to live in a frequently asked questions document or whatever the case may be, that should get added into Schoology. That's the reference place that we're sending everybody to. So let's put those reference materials where we're sending all of our families to on a daily basis, because they're not all going to the website.
I wonder if it would be helpful to have a last updated tag for questions. Maybe that's too labor intensive. I'm just trying to think about how people could sort through it if they were scanning again to say, oh, okay, I looked at this in early August, now I'm looking in October, and they could, I don't know, or maybe I can leave it to the experts on how you could flag new content, new policies.
Yeah, we can talk to our communications department. If you recall, for when the pandemic first hit, it was almost most recent information first, and then the more archival information was buried. So
yeah, and we can absolutely talk about it at the next CRC meeting to lend support. But I think the idea that updates, I mean, more minor, especially that are safety focused, should be flagged somehow, some way, and possibly multiple channels.
Okay, so if you can update us as far as how the communication plan as well on your Thursday letter, that would be great. Thank you.
and just to let me echo, Dr. Montgomery has been invaluable. I said it earlier, probably before she was on, but I've enjoyed our conversations. She's also interacted with the athletic director, with the NISFA guidance that has come out. So we are really trying to move quickly on a lot of this changing information. I just needed, for my own peace of mind, your comfort level, because staff is looking to you or the medical advisory board. And to me, there may come a time to bring something to you or to reconvene the medical advisory board. I don't think this happens to be the item, but when those times come, I think it will be important. But for this, I think we can be lean and mean and move quickly on this. Thank you for the feedback.
I believe technically, since we had a motion and a second, we do need to withdraw the motion to approve the resolution. So who made the first on that? Was that you, Dan? Rebecca? So then Rebecca, you're withdrawing your motion?
I am withdrawing my motion.
Thank you very much. Okay, next on the agenda, district goals and board goals. So this draft district goal and draft board goals are based on our discussion that we had back in, I want to say July, but I could be wrong. So this is just the language that Sherry and I recalled from that discussion. So we are looking for feedback and a little wordsmithing to get that into shape. Now, Dr. Tice is still working on the focus items, prioritizing those, and he will bring those back to the board at a later date. But for this evening, we want the board to look at the district goal and draft and board goal to see if this language reflects what we discussed at our last meeting. And I should have said prior to that, is there a motion that the Board of Education hereby approve the district and board goals for 2020-21? Thank you, Kelly, and a second from Sherry. Now let's have some discussion. We can start with the district goal, perhaps.
One thing that jumped out at me, just wordsmithing, was provided an appropriate education consistent with the district high standards. I don't love appropriate. I don't know if you want to say high quality or, provided an education, even education consistent with the district's high standards. So one of those two, but appropriate just feels a little bit out of place to me. And then my only other thought was, well, I guess we want to keep it flexible as the year may change, but we're currently in a hybrid model, but I guess it's not a hybrid model for everyone. I'm just thinking out loud as to whether we want to say whether using in-person, remote, or hybrid. I think it's fine.
I agree with you on the word appropriate, removing that and rewording that. And I think that the in-person, remote, and hybrid is something that will cover whatever might happen this year, so we can keep that.
Yeah, I like removing appropriate and just education consistent with our high standards. That says what we need to say without the word appropriate. Any other thoughts from the board?
Last is just in the very last piece of it, the while ensuring that all student needs are met. In my view, should be all student and
Students.
staff needs.
Daryl, were you saying something as well? Okay. Okay, so it looks now to, we just removed that word appropriate to provide education consistent with the district's high standards, and then ensuring that all students and staff needs are met. Any additional feedback on the district goal? Okay, let's move on to the board draft goal.
I had a suggestion for the opening sentence. After the board will, I would like to propose that we say will strive to better educate itself. Because the way it's reading now, it's assuming that we've never tried to educate ourselves on race and diversity.
Good point. I would add after, wait, am I muted? I would add after the third line, takes action against prejudice and discrimination in all forms. I think that's important. It's not simply a racial issue. It could be discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender, economics, all sorts of things. So I would just add discrimination, prejudice and discrimination in all forms. The last line, oops, examine how, of course I would click off of it. Examine how past incidents of racism and discrimination have been handled in the district. So we would have to go, that suggests going back and like looking through some sort of report of an incident and, you know, reevaluating what was done. And I think more of the intent was to, you know, make sure we're aware of what's happened, but the bigger emphasis on improving as we go forward. So, I mean, because we can re-examine for a long time without making progress. So that last line, examine how past incidents of racism and discrimination have been handled in the district. perhaps examine how incidents of racism, discrimination can be or should be handled in the district, but looking forward as far as how we would handle them.
I
You
agree
gotta
with
quite
that.
word that right.
Marissa?
Elena?
I mean, I went back and I listened to all our meetings in which we discussed board goals, and I'm just
Mhm.
curious as to how some of this was put together. Some of it, as I read it, does sound administrative in nature, and I'm a little concerned about that. Make sure that we don't step over that edge, that line, excuse me, board governance responsibility versus administrative. So some of these things, as you just mentioned, examining, excuse me, where was this? How they've been handled in the past. We've never had that discussion as a board, whether or not that's something we'd like to look at. So there are other things that are in here that we have not discussed. So I just wondered where you came up with the verbiage. Like, if it didn't come from a board meeting, where did it come from?
So these are from notes that were taken at, I can't remember, Sherry, what meeting was this at?
I don't remember what board meeting, but it was one that was on YouTube.
Right,
So
I listened to the whole meeting. Every
and it-
meeting where we've had board goals on the agenda,
Yeah.
I went back and I listened, and that's why I'm asking. I just want to make sure that it's a collective sentiment of the board moving forward. And again, this does read a bit administrative to me in certain portions. So I just want us all to be comfortable with it before we finalize it.
Well, I think that's what we're doing this evening, is going over the language and the verbiage and making sure that everyone's comfortable with it. Now, I can't remember what meeting these notes were taken at. I know it's difficult when someone's trying to take notes to bring in all the thoughts of everyone who was at the meeting. So these are the best notes that we have from that task. That being said, if there are things in here that we should not be looking at as a board because they are administrative, let's identify what those are and let's remove them. And if there's any language in here that we are as a collective are not comfortable with, now's the time to take it out. So this wasn't just, I didn't write these notes, quite frankly, but it does sound to me as to reflect what we discussed at previous meetings. So I think here we are now. Let's see what we need to do to change this to make it okay for the board to approve it.
And I appreciate that, Marissa, and that's why I asked the question, because notes are irrelevant. We have it live on YouTube where you can go back and actually listen to what the actual conversation was. Your notes can be inaccurate. So I don't know if anyone else took the time to go back to listen, but as I read this, things were coming up that it was as if I was hearing it for the first time.
So when I did exactly what you did, is I went back to the meetings when Marissa and I were given the task to compose these and to wordsmith them, and using exactly what you listened to. This is what I heard and this is how I put it together, and I gave it to Marissa and we both agreed that this is what we remember. So in any discussion, we're going to have places where we hear things differently. So that's why now that they're on paper, we can discuss them and come to an agreement about how it should be worded.
So what particular parts in here, oops, am I unmuted? What particular parts in here, Elena, you mentioned the last line, which I've motioned that we change, or not motion, but I've suggested that we change to examining past incidents. But what particularly in here would you like to see removed because it's more administrative as far as instead of board work?
Well, I think it's perhaps a bigger question of, does anyone else feel as if it reads administrative in nature when they read it? Because if I am the only person that is thinking that when I read it, that's my takeaway, then it doesn't matter.
Well, it does, because someone might not know. It's important that you share your perspective because it may open someone else to seeing it differently. So I don't want you not to share your perspective because you're concerned about being the only one.
I'm not concerned about being the only one.
This is what it's about. We want to make sure we're inclusive. I'll go to Rebecca, Kelly, and then Dan. I don't know whose hand was up first.
Yeah, so I mean, I think some thoughts I have on Elena's point. I don't know why it's echoing right now.
It's me, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. So in terms of a long-term district goal, devising a strategic plan, detailing how we'll confront racism. To me, we can't do it as a board by ourselves in a vacuum. And the same thing with restorative justice practices and discipline. We can certainly work to set policy, but we absolutely couldn't do that without being informed by and working in a partnership with the administration and administrators. So I guess maybe what's missing here as a broader piece is the idea that I know at least we talked about at CRC, which is a task force to look at these issues on a community level. I don't think we as a board, I think we can start the work to educate ourselves and think about next steps and how to set a framework. But I think ultimately the conversations and the work have to be broader than just our board. So what do other people think about that?
So Kelly, then Dan, then Daryl.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was reading, and maybe again, we just need to wordsmith this a little. I was reading it as the board will educate itself with a, I think, kind of in anticipation of a long-term district goal, not board goal. So I think I was looking at like our places to kind of start on this journey at the board level and kind of, continue to educate ourselves so that when it does come time to start putting strategies in place, for example, a task force or whatever else we might come up with, that, the long goal is, at least in terms of our board goal, is that the district would take this on, and obviously we would be a part of that as appropriate. But that, we anticipate that this is something that the district would be focused on going forward. So I don't know if that's just, wordsmithing the, I don't know how I put it, with an eye towards a long-term goal, or we just, I guess we just take that out, because I think it's pretty, it makes sense that we're going to start talking about this as a board, and then eventually it's going to be something that the district is going to take on. So whether we leave that in or not, we can make it more broad that way. But I mean, essentially what we've talked about was that we would be educating ourselves this year on what the issues are. And, we'd be starting to do that work. And I think having a retreat that's led by a DEI expert is, a great thing for us to do. And I think board retreat time well spent, in my opinion. So I'm okay with that. So if people feel like it's getting too much into the weeds about talking about district goals and it might get confusing, then, I'm happy to, maybe we take that piece out. But, if other people have other, things that are concerning them, that it's too detailed or it's out of the purview of the board, I definitely, would love to hear that, because, I only, I only know what I have in my own head. So.
Kelly, were you suggesting to remove the part after our own biases and to turn that into something more broad? So it would end with participate in a retreat led by a DEI expert to explore our own biases, period. And then I think it was Rebecca who mentioned the task force, so that the rest of that would somehow be encompassed in the idea of, or some language about it, participation in a district-wide task force. Is that where you were seeing the board independent role being up until biases?
I mean, I think I was looking at the first sentence where it talks about with a long-term district goal. I think I was just speaking to, maybe that was just confusing things by talking about a district goal within a board goal. But certainly, we could certainly stop it at the biases, and, although I don't think there's anything wrong with kind of starting to have conversations about how we want to move forward, maybe how we want to move forward with the district, maybe not necessarily on the how and what of how we handle racism in the future, but how we come up with a plan to do this work in the future. So I don't know, I'm not probably giving any good language to add to this, but I guess I'm looking at maybe the first sentence and the last sentence, and maybe just making the board goal a little more self-focused on our own education and how we can work with the district in the future.
So I don't want to repeat what's been said. My concern was that specific provision of where we've crossed over from board goal to district goal of having a long-term district goal, devising a strategic plan detailing how FM will do X, Y, or Z. That's district work. That's not board work. So my suggestion is to dial it back to a much broader, much more general goal that would read something to the effect of the board will strive to better educate itself about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the impact of discrimination in the Fayetteville-Manlius School District, and engage in a board retreat to evaluate how, I haven't finished typing, how to engage in X. And just keep it very generalized in that manner. It's still all encompassing, but it's not a board goal to do district work.
To that point, we know we still have, Dr. Tice is still working on prioritizing the focus items. So from that list, there may be some items that are generated from our discussion or that rise to the top from our discussion at the retreat. And that maybe a task force is something that is part of that list eventually. I think, Daryl, did you have your hand up next? Anybody over here? Then I'll get Elena and then back. Oh,
I would certainly echo. I thought Kelly put it very well. I agree with Dan. As a board, I don't think it's our place to look at how things have been done in the past or how things should be done differently. But to educate ourselves, I think is very definitely our role.
Elena?
The first sentence is an area that did bother me when we referred to a long-term district goal. So I won't go back to that, but also the second paragraph. The board will examine ways the district can promote a healthy climate when addressing student discipline. Again, and how restorative justice practices can be incorporated into policy. If we're incorporating anything into policy, I do agree that that's our role, but I don't know that it's necessarily our responsibility to examine ways the district can promote a healthy climate. I just feel as if we have administrators within our buildings that do that work. So that is another sentence that does leave me feeling a little uneasy.
Okay. Rebecca,
So I'm sorry, so I finished typing my sentence. You had gotten to me in mid-sentence before. So let me just read this, if I may, just as a proposal. Obviously, to be talked about more. The board will strive to better educate itself about diversity, equity, inclusion, and the impact of discrimination in the Fayetteville-Manlius School District, and engage in a board retreat to evaluate how the board may assist the district administration in further embracing acceptance and action against prejudice and discrimination. So not doing the district's work, but evaluating how we can assist the administration if and when applicable.
I like that, except for the word assist. I would use the word support because we should be supporting them. But I like it. Yeah, that's the only thing I would change in what you just read. And I do think we could get. We've talked a bit back and forth about this restorative justice practices, but there could be a whole. I mean, it doesn't really fit in, particularly with this goal, but this goal is really focusing on diversity and equity, although
I mean, I know I've brought that up myriad times over the years, or maybe
it's a really good program.
I think my point is, I think that's a strategy, and that's one thing to look at, but I feel like it falls under the purview of what Dan just said. So in our discussions, and I would imagine that would be one of the things that Craig or the administrators might, want to pursue, and in whatever way that policy or the code of conduct would take that on, that's certainly something we could be educated about at a minimum. So I'm okay with that not being in our board goal.
See, I had looked at that from the start, from when we talked about it back in that July 20th meeting to now, is I'm not conflating these two. I'm looking at these as two totally separate, distinct goals, one not necessarily having anything to do with the other. So
I agree with you, Dan. That's how I looked at it.
Dan, can you read that back one more time?
someday I'll get used to this. Hold on just 2 seconds. I had one typo I gotta fix here. The board will strive to better educate itself about diversity, equity, inclusion, and the impact of discrimination in the Fayetteville-Manlius School District, and engage in a board retreat to evaluate how the board may support the district administration in further embracing acceptance and action against prejudice and discrimination.
I think that's a big goal.
It's a very ambitious goal, but it's broad that it incorporates everything that we've discussing without getting into the specifics and without getting into the what I think is administrative work.
And we can continue this goal in another year as well. We don't have to make it a one-year goal. Go ahead, Rebecca, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just two things I'm thinking about. One is we've talked about hearing from community members, and we will be hearing from the community. And I don't know that I hear that in that goal in terms of hearing.
So I did have it, and I had that under the umbrella of engage in a board retreat to evaluate how the board may support the administration. And I would say we'll talk about it, and we may decide at our retreat that engaging in a community task force or whatever may be a thing that we can do to help support. So I had in my mind it's under that umbrella.
Because I mean, definitely community task force, but I guess one step back from that is hearing from these community members that have reached out to us this year. And I know we've had robust discussions about who's the right person, who's the right group to hear that. Is it a committee? Is it the administration? Is it a full board? But I would like to see some language in there that speaks to the fact that we're listening to our community and not just educating ourselves in a bubble. So I'll think about the language in a minute. And then the other thing is just, can someone mute back? 'Cause I'm echoing myself. Sorry. Just is that goal a better education? I mean, I guess I think it is. I just want to make sure it translates into action. And I think people are looking to us to move forward with not just educating ourselves and thinking about the best plans, but what are we going to do? And it may very well not be realistic to make those decisions in the next 6 to 9 months. But I'm just challenging us. Is this aggressive enough in terms of a clear action that will rise out of educating and talking about it?
Well, can we put like a timeline for ourselves? Like by, we'll have, I don't know, 2 board retreats, and by the, end of the second retreat, we have to have some sort of plan to move something forward, whether it be a task force. I mean, we don't have to say that out, but we have to have some sort of strategy by the end of the year of what this is going to look like, or what the board needs to, do within the purview of the board, of course.
Well, one thing I think that is going to be very important is that we have 3 or 2 groups and 1 individual who we've invited to come to speak to the board, but they have only outside information. I mean that in terms of not being up to date as far as the practices and procedures that we have incorporated into the district at this time. So I think that it's important that those groups and Dr. Dotcher, am I pronouncing that correctly? Dotcher, have an opportunity to connect with our administrative team, right? They've already met with Dr. Tice. 1 group met with Dr. Tice and I, but to meet with some of our assistant superintendents so they can hear what is actually occurring, because they've expressed a lot of different opinions, and they've had some experiences, but some of those were in the past, and some of them are not based on what our current practices are. And I think there should be there needs to be an understanding of how we are operating and why things are done in some cases. I know that it was very helpful for the current student group when they met with Dr. Tice and I. They had a list of issues, concerns, and when we went through those, and we were able to explain to them, okay, this is why, we do recruit, or not, we don't recruit, but here's why we don't have that many persons of color. It's a global issue, and explaining to them how that works. I think that was very helpful to them. So I think in terms of action items, I think before we get to that, I think we need to educate our community as far as what we are doing in SM currently, to make sure that when they're expressing themselves about what they'd like to see us do, that they understand what we are currently at as a district.
And to back up from there, I think that's educating ourselves about what we currently do.
Mhm.
So it's
Right.
also just looking at, we're striking the line about past practices and looking at not only what has not gone well, but what is going well in this realm. So I think I just want to make sure that fostering that dialogue between the district and our community stakeholders is wrapped into this goal. It may not be us as a board that's having those conversations. Like you said, it might be the administration, but that we are making that connection happen, and that because there's a lot of urgency for that to happen this year. And I just feel like it's our duty to connect the dots.
So I don't know if this is necessarily part of the goal. I do hear what you're saying, because I don't want the community to think that this is fluff and that, we're not actually going to take action. I'm just not sure of what we should be taking action on yet. So to your point, that is part of educating ourselves and the community. So I think that perhaps a good timeline to this is to have, because these groups are working on presentations now, to have them connect with the administrative team, share those presentations, have that dialogue about what is occurring in the district, what their concerns are, and then have them present to the district about their experiences, so we do get that community input. And then we have the retreat, and from that retreat, maybe we can have some action items come out of that retreat as to what we feel like we should do, because now we've heard from the community has been educated, and we've also had some education about this issue. I think it'll be important that when we look at, we not only educating this group, but making sure information is shared broadly. So they have an opportunity to meet with administrators, but then, I think we talked about this at CRC a bit, publicizing, talking about that, sharing information on our website about, here's what's happening at FM in regards to this issue, because you're correct. This is something that the community really wants to see us actually taking action on and having some proactive work done. So overall, I like where we've landed with the wording, but I do think we should add, I'm struggling with as to whether those are just like bullets under the goal. So that we will develop action items after hearing from the community and administration, or how we want to incorporate the action item piece into this.
One question I have is, are we looking to have a series of retreats, or are we talking about one retreat? Dan's wording has one.
Obviously, we're going to have at least one, but I think some of this is work that, are presentations, information that we get at board meetings, because we want to be transparent. We want the community to see the work that we're doing. So yes, we do have retreats that are informational for board members, but I think we should consider how we're going to incorporate some of this into board meetings going forward. So I think there should be a follow-up retreat, but I do think there should be some work incorporated into our board meetings for the remainder of the year as well. We generally do that with all of with board goals anyway. We usually have updates and discussion at board meetings.
So my suggestion might be to expand it to just say engage in a board retreat, but engage in a board retreat and a series of discussions at board meetings on this issue, just so it's not just circumscribed to one meeting and evaluating from that one meeting, because we all know that that's just not realistic. And then I was just thinking maybe at the end of the sentence, well, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know what other people think about more of a stronger action piece coming out of this.
I mean, I think this is always, or at least always, this is just an issue when you make goals is, how do we know we are successful? So how do we measure them? And I think when I understand like we want to make this kind of vague because we're, heading into something where we don't really know what the outcomes are going to be, at least, in terms of the board and certainly in terms of the district. So, what can we measure against to know that we did what we said we were going to do? And I don't know. I'm struggling with how to word that into something that makes sense other than, what we've done in the past with like having, budget retreats or whatever. I mean, that was kind of our goal. There were more outputs, but that was what we agreed to in terms of measuring that we would be, have a bunch of retreats or information sessions to talk about the budget. So maybe we word this similar to that board goal from last year, I think.
Rebecca, I think. I'm sorry, Rebecca. There we go. I think part of yours is just the limitation to the retreat. I think we could resolve by just tweaking that part of the language to say, and engage in a board retreat and other discussions to evaluate how the board may support, etc. Just adding that piece, and I think speaks to this is not a one meeting and done. This is an ongoing, continual piece. I did email that first draft to all of you. I'll send that revision too. I'll email it to you right now.
I mean, Craig, do you have thoughts on sort of how to marry the action piece to, if we need something more tangible in terms of something more measurable, make it a truly a SMART goal?
A couple of things. I mean, the beauty of this is you wrestle with this year's goals. It's realizing that a year from now, next year's goals will be here soon enough. So you get ambitious and you want to solve the world's problems, but it has to begin with a first step. So I would encourage you on keeping it manageable for that first year, and then think of it as a multi-year goal of which you will then do something this time next year and the year after and so forth. That being said, the conversations that you have had about what are the outcomes are key. I've always been trained on what's the plan, what's the implementation, and what's the outcome. So I think part of that manageability is knowing that there's a grandiose long-range goal, and maybe this year is that awareness piece and setting up the stakeholder feedback. What are the ways? The task force might be one of many ways. Community survey, we might do focus groups, just like we did for the start times. I just, don't get me wrong, I think the task force would be important, but it might just be one piece of the puzzle. So maybe this first year is the awareness, and the outcomes are ways in which we will educate ourselves, as Mr. Seidberg put together here with his wording, but also helping to define, is it a task force? Is it a community survey? Does that make sense? I just think, so don't make it as ambitious would be my advice. And then within that mindset, have those action items, those implementations based on the outcomes of getting that task force ready to mobilize, administering a community survey. And maybe we bring an outside consultant who's done this before, you know, that can help us. I don't know if that helps or hurts, but I just, yeah, those would be my 2 pieces of advice.
I think that's helpful. The last time we had a board diversity training, we did bring in a Professor Chapin from Syracuse University, but it was a very brief meeting and there wasn't follow-up. That was about 5 years ago, I believe. So I definitely appreciate your points that you made, Dr. Tice. Dan, I'm looking at the draft that you sent us, and there's one piece I didn't see, and maybe the board didn't agree with me. So the last part, in action against prejudice and discrimination in all forms. So I just had added, so against prejudice and discrimination in all forms, because I think that a lot of times when people or districts, organizations are looking at diversity and equity goals or issues, they're looking at it purely from a racial perspective. And it's more than a racial perspective. It should be inclusive of gender, sexual identity, economics. It's a lot of issues involved in that. So I just want to put in all forms.
I'm sorry. So the only reason I didn't put it into this draft was the original draft spoke specifically about systemic racism. This more generic version did not. So in terms of just prejudice and discrimination, it is by its nature not confined to any specific type because we haven't referenced any specific type in there. And we can add it, but I think it becomes redundant the way it was revised. But it's easy enough to add back if that's what everybody would like to see.
What are everyone's thoughts on that? Again, I have heard and I feel that sometimes there are groups that when they look at statements like that, they don't feel included. I know it does seem broad, but I just think sometimes that people think that it's about race instead of more broad, broadly. I think it's a couple of sentences or a couple of words to add to it. But if that's going to make us more welcoming or feel more welcoming to a lot of people, let's just add a couple words.
I don't have a problem with adding those few words at the end.
Fine by me.
So do we have an agreement regarding the language that we're going to use? The board will strive to better educate itself about diversity, equity, inclusion, and the impact of discrimination in the Fayetteville-Manlius School District, and engage in a board retreat and other discussions to evaluate how the board may support the district administration in further embracing acceptance and action against prejudice and discrimination in all forms. Now I really can't see anybody because I have to take my glasses off. Sorry. You're all blur. I think I know where everybody's sitting though. All right. So that was some really good work in a short amount of time too. I didn't see anything. That was some very good work in a short amount of time to fine-tune those goals. So I think we have a district goal and a board goal. And just to memorialize a district goal, can someone read that back with the changes? I don't think we made very many changes to that one. Dan, you're our fast typer. Do you have that one?
I can work it.
Sarah, thank you.
Oh, Sarah, okay.
District will provide a safe environment for Fayetteville staff and faculty in which students are provided education consistent with the district, whether using in-person, remote, or hybrid learning models. All guidelines for the
And you have the draft board goal in your email with the couple of words added at the end there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, very much. Thank
Did
you,
we
everyone.
decide to put the,
What, what are we doing with the
on?
second one?
yes, that's what I was going to say.
So are we looking at a second board goal then? Are you referring to restorative justice practices, Dan?
I think that whole piece, because we've talked about for several years now, taking a look at a variety of different student discipline matters and restorative justice. And I think it's time to at least again begin those discussions. That's been parked as a upcoming action for a long time. And I think I'm fine with it the way that it's worded, that we'll examine ways that if we changed anything, it would be the board will examine ways that the board can support the district in promoting, and leave the rest of it exactly as is.
This is a good time to do that since we're transitioning our policies. We can look at some of the tri-state districts policies and NISBA policies and other school districts that use particularly restorative justice practices to see what work we may want to do in that regards. And not to put anything on anyone's plate, but if we do adopt that as a goal, perhaps it's something that policy can work on and report back to the board about the research, do the research and report back to the board about different practices that they found that we may wish to incorporate into our policy. So that would read, the board will examine ways to support the district in, what was the other part, Dan?
So I had the board will examine ways the board can support the administration in promoting a healthy climate when addressing student discipline, and how restorative justice practices can be incorporated into policy and our code of conduct.
Is everyone okay with that? Is a second? Okay, so we've got 2 board goals and a district goal. And we had a motion to approve the district goals and board goals. And a second, we've had some wonderful discussion. All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? All right, wonderful.
Are we saying as revised?
As revised. Thank you, Sherry. I'm so excited that the wordsmithing only took 1 board meeting. I just didn't know what to do.
Can I just, while we're on this topic, and I know you said we're going to talk about specifics of the agenda for the retreat when we get there. As this discussion takes place and as we evaluate this, it's very easy, as hard as it is to hear, it's very easy to hear the list of here's all the things that are bad. But we also know that this district has taken many, many positive steps to address many of these issues, even if they haven't addressed all of them, because I don't think we're in a world where we can address and eliminate all of them. So I think it would be important at this retreat, not just for us and not just a moderator to be there, but if we're going to educate ourselves about this, I would think it's equally appropriate for all of us to be educated about all of the things that the district has undertaken, and whichever administrators are most appropriate and applicable to be part of that for that education piece. I think that's very important for us to have any meaningful discussion.
I agree, Dan. That's what I meant earlier when I said it was important, or part of what I was saying, that these groups should meet with the administrators, and then we all should get the benefit of what's happening in our district. That started with the memo that we received from Jeff Gordon discussing the work that's been done or where we are as far as employment. So yeah, definitely. And we've had our retreats with administrators where they've spoken to these different issues. So yes, that's definitely the intention that because we have done a lot in the district and there's a lot of great work going on in the district in regards to diversity. It's not negative. There's a lot of positive things that are happening. Okay. Where am I? Board development, got nothing there. Well, working agenda items. I think we can just move one off of there because we've found a place for it. Future Board of Education meetings. We've made a few changes there. As far as topics, we will get another doodle out for a retreat date. I missed dates to remember when we had things to go to. All right, moving on to consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? Thank you, Kelly. Second from Daryl. All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? All right. Now we have item 7.01, which is the superintendent evaluation procedures and timeline. Dan, you have some questions?
Yeah, so I was just trying to understand what the purpose of this was. So it's labeled Policy 1000 Exhibit D, but this is not, we have a Policy 1000 Exhibit D, and the contents of that is what's now in the second column of this document. So are we just trying to put together a timeline so that we know, or so the board officers know what we're trying to do this year? Because it looked to me like here we're trying to adopt a new or revised Exhibit D, and that's not really obviously the process by which to do that. So I want to understand what this is and why this is.
This is just approving the timeline for the superintendent's evaluation process for this year. There are some dates that are not included in here because we'll look at our calendars as we get closer to May to put those in here. But this is just approving the dates for the superintendent evaluation process for the year. So we're not changing any policy. This is just the timeline for the evaluation process.
So this isn't going anywhere. This is strictly our internal timeline, nothing more than that. Yes.
I'm not sure where would it go. I mean, I'm just
Well, I know
confused.
certain things had to be filed by September 10th, which was the process, which is the actual Exhibit D. Which so that's why I'm saying I don't know what.
This is our timeline and when we would expect to get different things to get these items done for the superintendent evaluation process.
Okay, so then I just think this Exhibit D needs to come off the top of the title of this because this is not Exhibit D to Policy 1000.
Okay, we can remove that heading from it and replace that with timeline for completion of superintendent evaluation process.
And then lastly, there was just one piece on here, which was number 4, which the actual Exhibit D talks about what needs to take place during April. And then this is on here as taking place May 3rd to 11th.
Oh, good catch. We need to change that date. So we need to move things up. That piece actually should go, for example, that should go with April. Try April evaluation. I think that would go where it says April 20th or 20th or 30th. Yeah, there we go. Self-evaluation. So we can move that up. We can move the item that's marked May 3rd through 11th. Number 4, during April, the superintendent completes a self-evaluation. We can move that up to the week of April 20th through the 30th. Okay. Any other things on the timeline that we need to change? All right. So is there a motion that the Board of Education approve the proposed superintendent evaluation timeline as presented? Thank you, Sherry. Second from Rebecca. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay. So next on the agenda is a proposed executive session for the purpose of discussing the employment history of a particular person. Is there a motion to adjourn to executive session for that purpose? Thank you, Rebecca. Second from Jason. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? All right, so we'll take a short break so that we can get off the live feed and we can clear the room so that we can have our executive session discussion. Thank you.